Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. When it comes to the spiritual realm, there are many questions that Christians have about it. And yet in the Bible, we get very little in terms of a picture of what goes on there. We know that at death, our spirit enters the spiritual realm and is placed under the care of God. In Revelation, we get a picture of what is going on in heaven at the time that John sees the vision. In our recent study of 2 Corinthians, we get a very brief glimpse into heaven, that indeed things are going on in the presence of God. But apart from that, we get very few other glimpses, only telling us that being in the presence of God is a place that we should desire to be. This lack of information may cause us to believe that heaven is a rather dull place, at least for now, with God merely sitting on a throne watching everything going on this earth, much like we sit around and watch television. Here in Job, though, we find that that is not the case. So if you have a Bible with you now, you can turn to Job chapter 1. We're going to be reading from verses 6 to 12. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Job chapter 1, beginning at verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around everything that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands and his possessions, and have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he shall surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. In the last lesson, we were introduced to Job, a righteous man who feared God and loved righteousness, acting as a priest for his family in order that God would forgive their sins. In verses 6 to 12, the scene shifts. The question is, to where? Well, it all depends on what the sons of God mean. And for the answer for that, there are two main views. The first view is that the sons of God mean the followers of God. We saw that back in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, and in our study of Romans, for Romans 8, verse 14 says, "For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God." In fact, the vast majority of times in Scripture that we read sons of God, the meaning in the context is clearly followers of God. However, the second view is that sons of God means angels. Is there scriptural backing for sons of God to be used in this way? Yes, and it's right here in Job. For the Lord speaking to Job in Job 38, verse 4 to 7 says, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurement? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" From our knowledge of Genesis 1, we know that man was created on the sixth day of creation and created last. Therefore, the sons of God in Job 38 cannot be man. The only ones in that context that could be described as the sons of God there would be angels. So which one is it? Well, it appears from the context not only of chapters 1 and 2 and the book as a whole that the sons of God have to be angels. For if it meant followers of God on the earth, then Job would have been there and would have been privy to the whole conversation between God and Satan. But if this was true, is there really biblical backing for angels to have times when they come before the throne of God for specific purposes, almost like an audience with God? And the answer to that is yes, and we have seen that in our past studies as well. If you go back to 1 Kings chapter 22, we're going to read verses 19 to 23. Then Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne and all the host of heaven standing by, on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, and another spoke in that manner. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said to him, In what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. All the host of heaven in that passage has to be angels. Now, interpreting sons of God in Job as angels, of course, presents another question that people have, which is, what is Satan and evil angels doing in heaven? Isn't heaven a place where nothing defiles can enter, according to Revelation chapter 21, verse 27? And yes, that passage does say that and does mean that. But that is a picture of after the judgment day. The scene in 1 Kings 22 and here in Job 1 appears to be telling us that God allows at specific times and for specific purposes for evil angels to come into his presence. And as humans, who are we to question who God allows into his presence? It doesn't say that evil angels are living in heaven or are constantly in God's presence. Job simply is stating that there came a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before him. Now to this, someone might ask, how could evil angels be described as sons of God? Well, there are a couple things I have to say on that. First off, God created angels, and in the beginning, they were all good. Thus, angels would have been sons of God in the sense that they were created by God. Now, when the angels rebelled against God, they sinned, and God holds them accountable for that. But do they cease being considered created by God when they did that? No. So from a purely technical sense, even evil angels could be described as sons of God. But you don't have to be so technical to understand what is going on here. Verse 6 says that there came a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came along with them. Was Satan being described as a son of God? No, he just came along too. So it is very likely what is going on here is that from time to time God's righteous angels came before God's throne to present themselves to him, to worship him, and likely give an account of their doings. And on this particular time, and perhaps others too, Satan decided to come as well. So sons of God do not have to include evil angels or Satan, thus ending the issue with Satan being in heaven before the presence of God. And that is why, after all this consideration, I believe that what is being talked about here in Job takes place in the spiritual realm, and sons of God means angels in this context. So, we have the picture of heaven, where Satan tags along for the ride and is in the presence of God. It should be noted that in the Hebrew, Satan has the article the attached to it, causing some to believe that instead of translating the passage to mean the one that Christians know as the devil, that it should be translated as the adversary, which is what Satan means. And what we have here is an angel whose job it is to be the adversary of man and to accuse man before God. However, this doesn't comport with other scriptures, for later on in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, Peter says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. By the language used by Peter there, it sounds an awful lot like what we're reading about here in Job, meaning that the adversary is the devil and that Satan is an apt name for him, because that's what he is, man's adversary, much like Jesus' name literally means the Lord is salvation, a description of who Jesus is and what he has done for mankind. So, Satan here is the devil, and we can be confident in that conclusion. With Satan now before God, God asked Satan from whence has he come. Now, of course, God knew this, but he gave Satan the opportunity to tell God, and for the other angels who did not possess all knowledge to learn as well. Satan said he came from the earth, from going to and fro on it. What was he doing? He was tempting man to sin, as he always does. God then asked Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Literally meaning, have you set your heart on Job? For Job is an upright man who feared God and shuns evil. Now, first of all, this is quite a compliment coming from God, for Job was not a sinless man, but he was a forgiven man, for he followed the law of pardon given to the age of man at that time. But in saying this, God was saying something else to Satan. He was saying that Satan was a liar if he came before God and said that all men were like him, sinners who do not desire to follow God with all their heart. God was saying that there are some that do, and it was possible to follow God, as is evidenced by Job and his conduct. God was removing any excuse Satan might have had for trying to justify his own actions and evading punishment. But Satan scoffed at this and told God that Job only serves him because God had made him rich, because God had placed a hedge of protection around him and his family. But if God took all that away, Job would curse God to his face. In other words, Satan is saying that Job really doesn't worship God because he loves God, but because God made him rich. God responds by saying that he would remove the hedge of protection around Job and allow Satan to do to Job as he saw fit, with the only exception being that he couldn't touch the person of Job. This meant that he could take away Job's possessions and his family, but he could not afflict or kill Job's body itself. This shows us that Satan isn't all-powerful, that God can restrict the power of Satan that he has. Now, he doesn't, at least at this time, restrict him fully, for he allows him to tempt man in order for man to have his faith tested, to learn to love God from his heart, and that God is a provider of that which is good, and to learn reliance on the grace of God rather than himself. But many would ask, why would God allow this? The answer is not directly given, but from examining the scene itself, we can deduce a few reasons why God allowed this. First of all, God's goodness had been challenged. Satan is saying that God favors Job above all others, and that is only because of this that Job serves him. Take that away and Job wouldn't be a follower of God. He would become a rebel against God just like Satan was. In other words, Satan is saying that without God's blessings, nobody would serve him, and that therefore God's expectation of righteousness of his creation would be unjustified because it would be impossible to live up to God's standards. But the second reason is that the challenge wasn't made before God alone. It was made before his angels too. Would Satan be right or would God be right? The angels needed to know that. And the third reason is that Satan needed to know the extent of his own knowledge as well. All of this played into why God allowed this. Now, God knew Job, and he was confident that Satan would be wrong, but in order to prove that, he allowed Satan to take away Job's blessings. And in the next lesson, we're going to find out the result of Satan's challenge and whether God's goodness and his statements about Job were correct. With that, our time is up for today. If the Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Job chapter 1, verses 13 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.